Hello, my name is Matthew Olson. I'm the Director of Network Development for the Montana Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to my office here at the Stubtoe Ranch on Rock Creek, Montana. It's where I'm spending my coronavirus isolation and quarantine, but we're all feeling good. And the reason that I'm welcoming you here is for a leadership series that I have really been working on for many years. Been thinking about, been discussing with some of my previous bosses like Abraham Kim and a lot of the board members that helped put together the Global Water Exchange. And now with the Montana Chamber of Commerce, we're launching a series called Resilience and Renaissance. And the reason that we're doing this is really to help our community explore differing views and common leadership principles that can help us navigate this crisis together. We think that this might be a way for us to accelerate how we provide mentorship and pass on our values, our lessons, our experiences, some of our failures and successes to future leaders. We'd also like to be conveying that this is a time for positivity and creativity. What can we do to maximize this hopefully short window that's going to reset so many of our habits? Our workplace behaviors, the environment, our social norms, and certainly a much, much different economy on the other side. So I'm going to be capturing my conversations with leaders from the Montana business community, people that I've met and made friends with over the years. And we're going to be putting these out as a series of hopefully webinars, as well as the audio files and potentially blog posts, so that you can consume them in whatever way you prefer to consume information. We're all spending a lot more time in front of our screens these days. So with that, I hope that you will enjoy and tune in, and please share and comment and provide feedback. And if you'd like to be interviewed for this series, I'd surely love to hear from you. So with that, thank you very much, and look forward to speaking to you, hopefully. Cheers. The first interview that I captured for the Resilience and Renaissance Interdisciplinary Leadership Series was with Paul Carroll. And he's a man of many hats with a diverse background in both the public and private leadership experiences. And we looked at resilience and renaissance through many different angles. So with that, I hope you'll enjoy. And again, please give me your feedback on these discussions. Cheers. Hi, Paul.
Matt, how are you doing today? Good afternoon.
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm in self-quarantine isolation up Rock Creek like usual. Nothing really changed for us. How are things on the East Coast?
A little surreal. Lucky that we're able to spend time with family. So we're all trying to work out of the same situation in the same area. We've really seen in the last week and a half or so a real pickup on, it's gone from to, oh my God, it's here. So Rhode Island is one of the smaller clusters, but we have a small population, but we're right between New York and Boston, which are major clusters. But
and everyone's healthy?
Thank God at this point. Yep. Knock on wood.
Okay.
Things are going well, I hope, at this point. Yeah.
Okay. That's great to hear. Thanks for giving us that update. As we were putting this together, I was thinking, when I think of Paul Carroll, the first word that comes to mind is resiliency. And the reason is because we met at the Mansfield Center Circular Economy and Sustainable Development Conference in Bozeman, Montana in the fall of 2017. And my memory with you is being in a bus and then walking from the bus up to Old Faithful, talking about, how important resiliency is around our critical, national infrastructure, the operations of that infrastructure, what we need to do to protect it. And now through, the Corona COVID-19 crisis, resiliency really came to mind. So thank you for agreeing to do this.
Sure, no, thank you.
Would you mind maybe giving us a little bit of a history of, how you got to where you are today and what it is that you're working on?
Sure, and I'll be perfectly honest, if you were talking to young university students and you said you wanted to get to where I am right now, you would never follow my path. So it's been very, it's been actually kind of a resilient path if you actually look at it. my whole training had been in international business, international relations, particularly between the United States and mainland China and Taiwan. So long story short, my graduate degree is in Chinese and international relations from Johns Hopkins in DC. And I was really focused on trade development and trade business development. Worked for a period of time. I was in charge of the Taiwan desk at the U.S. Department of Commerce in DC, and then at our unofficial embassy in Taipei, in Taiwan. And then went from there to really run the China program for Massachusetts Port Authority, Massport. And it was at Massport we did a lot to track China ocean shipping to the Port of Boston. But Massport was really where I was introduced into economic development. And the reason for that is Massport owned the Port of Boston, owned Logan, the bridges in the city, but it also owned a lot of real estate. And it was at that point, it was in the real estate, and I was looking at it and how they were developing. Right now, it's one of the booming innovation districts of Boston. When we were there, it was a fish pier. It was kind of the old area where it used to be the manufacturing centers for South Boston. So long story short, from that, I got involved in this issue of economic development, but really looking at the issues from kind of a systematic approach, a systemic approach, and worked in places like Virginia. We redeveloped one of the largest private sector Superfund sites as an economic development tool. Was over in the United Kingdom, ran a city development company in the city of Plymouth in Devon. And again, it was all, they were hiring you to start to just look at the systems. And it's really from that systems approach that I actually backed into resiliency. And I think really the issue of resiliency is it's not about just climate change. It's not just about the environment. It really is looking at the systems of how we are, whether they're environmental systems, financial systems, the interrelation, social systems, and political. And that's really when I look at resiliency, that's what I look at is how does it all fit together, the whole being greater than the sum of its parts.
Great, thank you. You mentioned that there was the Boston manufacturing was down on the pier. What was the main industry they were manufacturing?
Well, back then, originally, early on, they had a lot of textile and a lot back in the turn of the century. Then it was also one of our major ports. So it's where like Commonwealth Pier, which were then Fidelity brought over, and it's the International Trade Center. All of that area down there was a lot on logistics, global trade, but it was also some of the other manufacturing, textiles, leather, and those types of things beyond in the backside.
Can you give us an idea of the scale of economy there? If you have any metrics, like how many ships coming in and out a day?
Oh, no, I haven't been. So Massport, I actually, our department was, and talk about the last crisis, or one of the last crises, our department was international trade for Massport, and it was eliminated after 9/11.
Oh,
because the two planes that went into the towers in New York left from Boston and left from our area. What I do know is when we tracked China shipping, and it was really interesting because at that time when I was working for the Massport, it was all on the airlines because it was the development of Logan Airport. We had I was hired specifically, and it's kind of one of those things when your boss says this to you, when you go to this great conversation, it's like, all hands on deck, building out the airport, building out the air cargo, air passenger travel. And he turns to you and says, okay, Paul, I want you to work with the seaport. And you're kind of like, oh God. But it was really to look at that time, Boston was it's the oldest public port in the United States. So at that point, there was a system of sea, land, Maersk, it was a coalition of different companies had broken up. And they were looking at privatizing the port, making it basically either Nova Scotia and New Jersey, New York, New Jersey ports, in Boston be a feeder. It was through that we actually had to do looking at China and how to attract Chinese shipping. And that's how we did Costco, China ocean shipping. But I don't know that right now, Logan itself has increased substantially up until whatever's gone on in the last couple of weeks. But I mean, it's become a real global, one of the hubs.
So maybe a great lead in there. You just mentioned they got shut down after 9/11, right?
Mm-hmm.
You managed that obviously through a crisis. If maybe we could transition into some of the leadership resiliency that you mentioned. There's certain characteristics or certain perspectives that will help all of us get through this. It's an unprecedented time in my children's history, for example. Yeah. I'm thinking about how I lead as a business leader as well as a
That's
husband and a father, right? So can you speak a little bit to that? Some of the lessons maybe that you learned leading through previous
Well,
crises?
I think actually, when we said about systems, and I think what you just said is exactly what we need to look at resiliency, and we need to look at it specifically. What you said is, I look at it as a business leader and also a father.
Right.
And I think that the key and I think too often in the society we work in, we have really committed business people. We have, great ideas. They make decisions which they have to because they're stakeholders. That's the system. But at the same time, oftentimes then they worry about things that happen as a parent. When we're talking about the future and like going, when the brighter days come, and they will come, God, hopefully God will be good to us and we'll get through and move forward to the next level. When those brighter days come, what we have to take from, I think, right now, and a leadership issue, is to realize all the hats that we wear every single day. I think that's a key leadership, because we can make one decision, but we need to realize that these decisions were part of a system or an ecosystem. And business people, public sector people, individuals, families, we have to understand that we're part of a system, and what we impact. That system, whether we like it or not, is going to try to go back towards equilibrium. So whatever we do is going to either swing one way. But I think for the leadership area, what you just said is really important. The idea is you're seeing yourself with your two hats. We all need to see ourselves with where we impact everything.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think did we solve it all? Did we crack it all?
Yeah, except that, the other, we'll figure the other part of the world out next week. No.
Right.
But
I know a lot of a lot of the members of the Montana Chamber of Commerce, a lot of people that we both know through our interactions with the Mansfield Center and the Global Water Exchange. I think this is all uncharted territory for us, right? We're, at least for me personally, right? To lead, right? Not only an organization, as you said, but a family, and the impacts that this are going to have to our kids, for example, right? I know that the state of Kansas and the state of Missouri have shut down the rest of the semester. School year is over. The Montana schools are trying to figure out how to transition to online as quickly as possible. What does that do to our social interactions, right? To preparing these kids for the other side of this. And during this time, can you think of anything, or you make any recommendations on kind of how we should focus, where we should focus? What, I guess it's an open-ended question for your advice and mentorship.
Yeah, and I think what you just said is, I'm in my mid-50s. My parents were older when they had me. My grandparents were older when they had my parents. So my parents grew up, and my father served in World War II. My grandfather served in World War I. And I think one of the things that, when you said we haven't gone through this before, it's different. We may not have gone through this. Our nation has continually have gone through these types of challenges. And I think the real key thing for us to, and this is not being Pollyannish, we are facing something that is really terrifying. It's global. It's on so many multiple areas, vectors at the same time. But the issue I think we really need to look at is, if you are looking at resilient leadership, really you need to look at it in 3 stages. And the 3 stages is the event. This is one of the things when I worked with the city of Newport, and we looked at resiliency as a test case for private sector and impact investment. And we really talked about, and I kept saying that it's a 3-stage. The first stage is the event. So it could be a natural disaster, a financial disaster, a social issue, a disease, or a combination of all. I think what's really difficult in this one is it's a combination of multiple things, and it's all across the nation. But that first stage in the resiliency is the event, and you have to survive. And it's a period of triage. So everyone right now, every organization, every family, everyone, we're going through a period of triage, just like if we had had a heart attack at this point. So the ability is to survive this and to get through this. The second stage, and I think this is where you're trying to go, and this is where people, as we have more time at home, and after the terror is still going to be there, the fearing of financial health, those issues, to start to think that, what does it mean to be sustainable? And I don't use the word sustainable like when people say, oh, green and all those other things. That's all part of it, but it's like, that's oftentimes a cafeteria version of, I picked this to be sustainable. When I look at sustainability as the second stage of resiliency, and that's exactly what you said. As we've gone through the triage period, how do we look back and say, could we have avoided this? What could we have done before to have mitigated this? What did we do that was wrong? What did we do was right? And that's that kind of learning from the event, from the actual event. And then I split with a lot of environmentalists when we say resiliency, because they sometimes interchange resiliency with sustainability. And I don't think that's it. I think resiliency is then, and I'm going to use a word that some people may find inappropriate, how do you profit from that sustainable learning period? And I use the word profit meaning benefit. It's just not financial, but how do you, are you going to do better things? Are there new areas that come forward? And I think for leaders right now, and we have to think the world in a year is going to be different. Whatever we do now, and it doesn't mean it has to be worse, or that it can't be better, in fact. What we have to do now is to realize what we do now is going to it will be different. The world's going to be much different than we know it right now. What we do now can make it a better place, or it can make it a much worse place. So I think for people that are looking to sit back and say, okay, going back to the early conversation, where do I fit in this whole system? What do my impacts do for my employees, for the people that I work for? What are we doing right now that can now move us to say, recognizing we're not going to go back to what we are, and it's people who want to go back, we have to. I mean, it's part of being human, but really focusing on the fact of what is the future for us, and how do we make it a better future than a worse future? So whatever happened, there's plenty of people to be blamed or whatever we want to do and stuff like that. Right now is the triage period, and now once we go through the triage period, look at how do you start to develop to make it a better future rather than a different future.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. It wrapped up a lot of the things that I'm thinking about going, as I'm drifting off to sleep, and
yeah,
and quite frankly, some of the things keeping me up, right?
Yeah.
And I think putting it through, we've all, thank goodness, most of us have survived the event, and now is a period of adjusting to this new normal, right? Going to the supermarket and wearing gloves, right? Making sure you wipe down the grocery cart, right?
But going back and washing your hands more.
Yeah.
That beyond this, I mean, I know this sounds like a strange thing, but when people are like, well, and I even know this, so I'm doing it longer and everything like that, and saying, okay, we learned, we should have been doing this regardless of this. But these are things that hopefully will continue on.
Huh. Did you think there's anything else that has come to your mind in the last couple of weeks or months that you've said that have rung a bell that we should have been doing that, or some of these, some of the mitigation strategies that maybe we'll know to do better next time? Is there any, if you had a Monday morning?
Actually, it's actually something I've been struggling with for about the last 5 years in the United States. And we have some amazing things in the United States. We are, in many ways, an exceptional nation. But we were also a nation of that are connected to other nations. And I've watched, particularly when we've talked about resiliency, and in the run up to what's gone on in the last month or so here, and you saw the stock markets, it was really trying to get, I worked in the intersection of the public sector, the private sector, impact investors, social groups, the idea of trying to a systems approach to a city development. And I kept saying, there are a lot of things that are changing, whether it's in the climate, whether it's social funding, public funding, all those things, that we were basically at a time of preparation. And what was interesting is I'm doing some work in the United Kingdom, and I worked in the United Kingdom over a decade ago. And when I came back from the United Kingdom, I said the one thing that our public sector actually seems so much better. And I used to make jokes about it, saying I never thought I would say this, but our public sector seems so much better than the UK working in that intersection. But what's happened because of Brexit, and I said, when we've talked about climate change, we've talked about how you're going to fund things, not just in climate, but how are you going to find social? How do you start to measure the triple impacts of every decision that we make in the United States and in our daily lives? One of the things I kept hearing was kind of for another day. And we talked to a lot of city managers, and some of them were amazing, that entrepreneurial and saw the future, and then others were just like, kind of like their heads in the sand. And what I came to realize is when I kind of pushed them, last year we talked about when we were doing another test case of a development group, we were talking to groups of people who were running states, economic development, and these are key people. A lot of them had came out, they'd been city managers or mayors and those types of things. And about 2 years ago, I think right after Montana, one of the things we kept talking about was the bond connected to climate change. And we kept hearing, and that was something we really started earlier in Newport, very early on. And what happened is in 2017, Moody's, S&P, and Fitch, all the bond rating agencies, started saying going forward, bonds are going to be the ability for a community to raise bonds, or what they'll pay back on the bonds, the bond rating itself, is going to be tied to climate change. And then over those couple of years, and so when we were doing this, we kept pushing. And what I kept hearing from other people in the public sector was, well, we have so many other things. We have to keep the cops on the street. There's the fire. There's the schools. And I kept saying, look at all of that, what you're saying now, if you can't raise your bonds, or your bonds become more expensive, 33% of public spending in the at the local level is related to bonds. The other is revenue from taxes, which has been decreasing. And a lot of the other is looking at long capital planning. I kept hearing, when you really push them, thank God I'm no longer a city manager. And it was almost like, thinking back when I used to talk to my parents, it was almost like we were living in December 1st, 1941. We kind of all knew things were coming. We just didn't want to see it. And linking it back to the work I've been doing with the UK in the last year or so, because of Brexit, it was December 10th. So even though they still have problems and stuff like that, and I saw the movement, and I really think what's happened is we're having our December 7th right now. And that's the event. And it really is, people knew things were going to change. There were going to be events. We really had to get it. A lot of people didn't want to deal with it. Just like a lot of people just didn't want to deal with it in the beginning of December and back in 1941. Now we have to deal with it. So I think really that is, and I really was hoping that we as a nation were able to get ahead of this before the event. Right. But now that the event's here, I think you see the United States, what it did in World War II, it'll click in now. And it was sad that it had to be an event like this.
And when you say it'll click in now, what do you think will click in? What do you think will be some of the changes that we'll see clicking on the other side of it?
Well, one of the things, first of all, I think what you're seeing is, it's interesting. When I worked in the United Kingdom, what they were always saying is we were always late for a war in the United States, and the Brits, and and one of the big jokes was they would talk about, it wasn't a joke, it was a joke, but it was kind of a dig. I mean, it was a constant dig, particularly in World War II. And my comment was, well, you threw such a great party in 1917. We didn't think you really was throwing another one this quickly. That's why we were late for it. We didn't really think you were throwing this party. But I think what you see, and I'm hoping, is we've spent a lot of time, and I don't want to get into politics and stuff like that. We spent a lot of time fighting on things internally that divide us. This is either the thing that's going to totally divide us, and then we're literally dead, or it's going to what's unite us. And I think that mobilization that's going to happen, I think in the last, and I see it, and it's one of the things that really disturbs me in the United States up to today. It seems like most Americans can tell you exactly how much of the burden, I'm using that word in quotes, burden that they're paying for. And they know exactly in their minds how much of the burden other people are imposing on them. And I don't think we really understand that we all benefit. And there are things that we benefit, parts of it giving back and forth. I think what really needs to be strongly understood is we are part of a system. And when I hear people say, I shouldn't have to pay for this, but we like to flush our toilets to make sure it goes down or doesn't come back up. So I think with the mobilization, what I'm hoping is at this point is some of the rhetoric, as well as the pretending that these other things are so important, go away, and saying, I have to look at every other person in that I come across as a fellow American to be helped at this time. And if we do that, I think that can actually help reset going forward into the future.
You know, that's a beautiful way to wrap this up on a positive,
Yeah.
optimistic note with maybe a call to action to anybody who watches or listens to this, that, you know, we are all in this together and it's uncharted territory for all of us, and we got to look out for one another.
And I just want to, the final point I would want to say is, listen to what your grandparents probably told you, or if you heard. We're not a stupid nation. If we have the common sense, give up a lot of the other stuff that we want to fight about, and all this. Listen to what your grandparents said. When you pay for something, if you pay for something that's it lasts. If you don't pay for it, it's not going to last. That's what we need to be looking, I think, throughout the whole society. Have that common sense that our grandparents had, and we have been through this before. It's just different.
This was great, Paul. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks so much for making the time. I'll put your contact details there if anybody would like to reach out to you, if that's okay. And take care and stay safe and stay healthy, and God bless.
You too, and God bless, and good for your family. Keep yourself safe and wash your hands. Take care. Thanks, Matt.
Bye.